Good evening, YouTube. So tonight, I wanted to contribute to my commentary channel and share some thoughts and observations. It's been a while. I'm working on two fronts, my art-only YouTube channel and this channel, and also, I guess you could say, three fronts, because I go to work every day as well. And when I do go to work, I carry what I do here in the early mornings and late evenings when I get back from work. I take that to work as well. And thoughts cross my mind during the day, and then I jot it down internally, and sometimes those notes make it back. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get incorporated into longer narratives. So I follow a lot of independent journalists on YouTube, and I've been doing so for over 3 years now, mainly around the Palestinian plight, and now Israel is basically doing the Gaza Nakba Part 3 to Lebanon. Shout out to Volvo and CAT, creators of heavy equipment, who know that their equipment is being used to level civilian homes, carve hiding places for macabre tanks, doing nothing with that knowledge, actually designing machinery for those tasks. There is something to answer to there. Just putting that out there for Volvo and particularly CAT, which is a United States manufacturer of heavy equipment, who make a specific model of bulldozer for Israel to do what they do in being the apartheid nation that it is. It needs special bulldozers to plow through civilian asphalt, homes, businesses, while possibly being under fire, with resistance to that. And rightly so. There are many people covering Hezbollah's drone warfare against the IDF, and many doing deep dives into analytical and historical connecting of the dots of how it is that things are happening the way they're happening, how it is that Donald Trump is, and the Republican Party, and a very large majority of the Democratic Party as well, are shackled to Israel. And there's a historical pattern of cultural habits of infiltrating governments and systems and changing them in a clandestine way from the inside out. If you go through the history, you'll see these patterns. So it's a bad habit, a kind of mental construct or ideology or way of being that is handed down through generation after generation, how to do things. The Jesuits had a similar system, but for different reasons. And very different context as well. So I've been thinking today, before I go into some longer thoughts and feelings around some other areas, what I want to do with this channel. And it's sort of an evolving situation. I had ideas about React videos. And then I wrote and dictated some thoughts that I had posted on social media here on my channel. So I'm experimenting. And it occurred to me today that one of the things I want to support is solitude and individualism and what it means to be ultimately in a human construct without a lot of appendages as far as faith, belief, egoic convictions, ulterior motives, subconscious ulterior motives, strong attitudes, strong opinions, strong reactions. Not that strength is a bad thing, of course. Conviction is a double-edged sword. But as I experiment with this channel and I resonate or I don't resonate with what others are doing and what my strengths are, a kind of a minor revelation has occurred that I feel one of the attributes that I want to offer up is a kind of in between the lines offering, something maybe not so obvious, the pause, the space between an action and a reaction, where the individual is poised to respond, but hasn't yet. So there's a blank slate, relatively speaking, at least in the foreground. The older you get, the less the background and middle ground become, well, they become more opaque and less transparent. And The foreground, though, is seemingly transparent to semi-transparent, where you can still stand in front of your thoughts from time to time and inspect them, negotiate with time itself. So if you can get out in front of your thoughts and stay there, you can control time and how things are put on the table, so to speak. And that's what I want to support. I want to support I guess you could say thoughtfulness or contemplative observation, not just analysis, but looking, being there with the phenomenon and choosing your character, which aspects and attributes you want to demonstrate with, rather than this sort of routine behavior of either reactionary responses or a kind of ideology that you may take for granted because you've had it for so long that it just applies itself out in front of you without a whole lot of introspection and variety, let's say. So Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, Iran. Then you have these monarchies, UAE, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan. Those who enable what's happening, what Israel is doing ultimately. Some of them are saying they're no longer willing to normalize relations with Israel until there's a one-state solution or a two-state solution, one-state solution for Palestine, for the Palestinians, but ultimately a two-state solution, which Israel will never let happen. All the negotiations that Israel has ever had were ultimately propaganda, because if you investigate all the different summits that they've had, it's just them moving through the motions to then turn around and blame the failure of those negotiations on the Palestinians in order to reinforce their apartheid, clandestine operations. And so they ultimately, before there was the internet, and also when there was less independent journalists and media had not gotten so advanced, a lot of that was just going through the motions and creating like a false flag operation so that then the U.S. State Department could give the regime media talking points and say, well, we tried, the Palestinians failed. None of this is true. but they need the event itself in order to create a story around it. And if you investigate the actual negotiation documents, you realize that the concessions that Israel always puts into these documents are ultimately not just a stop sign, but a cliff edge, complete self-sabotage. And this is purposeful. I mean, they do it. It's a strategy that these concessions are totally a cognitive dissonant situation where it's like me saying, well, I'll sell you the car, but I get to keep the engine. You can buy the car, but I keep the engine and the keys. And oh yes, the steering wheel and the tires and the seats and the spare tire. Oh, and the gas tank. But you can have the rest. It's still a car. So this is pretty atrocious if you consider the ramifications and what it alludes to. Sabotage. It's and this has been going on for decades and decades. Creating a false propaganda around Palestinians being unwilling to negotiate. It's the exact opposite. And Israel, from the time they broke away from the British in bombing the King David Hotel, and when Britain handed Israel over to the UN, and America was the first to declare Israel a nation state. Many in the United Nations scoffed at that, thought it was a hoax, still is a hoax. Bad ideas on that scale don't evolve into good ones. Not dissimilar to America. So feeling this stuff, emotions, stress, the feeling of powerlessness, things aren't happening fast enough, justice and injustice, the feeling of how much injustice there is versus justice, carrying that around. The crew of the electronic intifada, metric tons of stress, I'm sure, that they carry in their hearts and minds. The ICC and the ICJ, although ineffective and completely neutered by simply the way they were set up, including the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, all of them are cucked to U.S. empire, and are in some ways symbolic vassal states to U.S. empire. Pure, I mean, I was going to say pure ego enablers, but I don't think that that's completely true in the sense that the individuals that make up those bodies do rebel, but they have no power. They have influence, but they have no enforcement power, which is unfortunate, which really needs to change. If the ICC and the ICJ had a standing military force bigger than any other on the planet, the patriarchy could possibly grow up and mature, and the pathological bad habits could maybe evolve into something more resembling adulthood and maturity versus what it's looked like for thousands of years. Ultimately, teenagers thumping their chests, trying to prove themselves. It's as if and I haven't really delved into the sociological aspects of this, like how it happens where a certain class of individuals, politicians namely, and world leaders, and then of course the military industrial complex that protects their immaturity, and then of course the whole psychological makeup of that industry, how all this happens, how they attract one another, how there's no real standard of psychological development, emotional development, intellectual development. There's no screening processes. That culture itself has no controlling mechanism to keep out the corruption that they vote towards these politicians to fight against, and yet those politicians are often duplicitous, where they'll fight for something as a token and give the people a little bit of something, but never enough. And I think the tides are changing. I feel like this system of that the patriarchy has is starting to crack in very deep ways. But we'll see. It's I've spoken about it on this channel before, that it's very possible that there's a circular situation going on down here where things are not meant to get better, that they repeat themselves in new, novel ways, but the contents are the same. It's like there's two evolutionary tracks. One, technology, and yet our emotional maturity is nowhere near the level of our technology, our technical maturity. Our morals, principles, ethics do not match our technology. So it's almost as if the technology is a coping device, almost like a kind of sweetener to distract us from this extraordinary contradiction. And yet that's all evolving. It's hard to say whether what stage the cocoon is in, and all the different reasons why things look the way they do. There's an upward trajectory in technology, but not so much in the human heart. I mean, it's 2026, and we have Donald Trump as president, and a tyrannical, ethnic cleansing Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin. And China is not altogether that far behind, considering their history with Tibet and their treatment of other cultures and other peoples of different belief systems. So the patriarchy, its evolution is seemingly not doing much at all. So tonight, all this was intuitive. I didn't really plan to talk about a lot of in any particular subject outside of just the commentary side. And one thing I wanted to that comes to mind I want to share is shadow projection. So I had an incident with an acquaintance, and it's one thing when you care deeply for someone from afar, like in your own private thoughts, you have empathy and compassion for them. You may even see parts of yourself in them, in the present, from your past. And yet, when the pedal hits the metal and you're in the moment with whatever's happening, things just are what they are. And you can still be that compassionate person, and yet you have to be other things too in order to maintain composure with the third party, and that is the event itself. So, in general, the event was without going into too many specifics, because I want to keep information respectful and have good boundaries around it. But the gist of the situation is that when someone verbally spills out a lot of judgment, anger, abuse in a sense, because that anger is often not warranted. It's simply a feeling, a misdirected feeling that has somehow caught on in the argument and has turned a discussion into an argument, into an explosive catharsis that does not resemble solving the problem at all. If anything, it creates a bigger problem. So ultimately the violence that often arrives in when a person becomes disconnected in a conversation and it becomes an argument, that disconnect means they don't see you anymore. They only see a phantom of whatever has triggered them. Now they're screaming at the mirror, and you're standing there, and you're absorbing all this. And then after they've cooled down a little bit, they may regret that. And then in the same breath, or at least the same time period of having had that explosion and violence, apologize and then look for sympathy as if they need to be the center of attention. Now, this is the most inappropriate time, in my opinion, to apologize and then draw attention to oneself. This is like a quasi gray magic zone of the psyche. And if you're gullible enough or naive enough to forget that you have just absorbed all that, and now they're the center of attention, there's something off there. And to me, if you resist accepting the apology and you simply indicate that this is not the time, that the priority, something else needs to be solved first, that you need a stove to have a cake. There's a sequence of events of right order. So ultimately, there's a trauma pattern happening there, where there's a cry for help in the form of rage or anger, and then there's an apology, and then a want of attention and acknowledgement. Never mind the victim of all that, right? Israel does this really well, by the way. So if you don't accept that, things can get even hotter, because the shadow projection doubles back to where it came, alone and with its own thoughts. And now it has to reflect, self-reflect. It's quite dangerous, actually. So just be careful, because it's not normal to know what to do in moments like that. If you sympathize and follow a kind of an automated status quo, you do yourself a disfavor. One, you don't state your boundary. You weaken your boundary, Because in a sense, you're saying it's okay to abuse me as long as you say you're sorry. As long as we make up. So see, that's a toxic relationship there. That's how things usually go, though, because we don't always know what to do. With what we're given or what tries to get through the door. So there's a dysfunction there. But if you see it for what it is and you don't allow it to get away with that, things can escalate. But at least you're protected in the sense that you have not given permission for that to reoccur again with the quid pro quo of an apology. As if the apology excuses the act. Not that Israel has ever apologized. All I'm saying is that when the victimizer performs something and then it turns around and says, well, I'm the victim, and its victim becomes invisible to it, there's something off there. You're being used for a movie screen, or old school would say punching bag. So just be on the lookout for such things. And last but not least, stealing one's fire. One day, I was speaking to another acquaintance, and we had spoken about some things casually, just day-to-day stuff, comparing notes, and I did this, I saw that, I understand this, I understand that. And then I got into sharing something that was painful to me. I began to express a vulnerability because I felt like, well, the conversation was going in certain directions, and then associatively something was said, and then I thought, oh, this is a good spot where I could share this piece of information. And that's what friends do from time to time. We share information in order to get understanding or a sense of shared struggle or camaraderie, however you want to put it. Well, just as I was about to express, I had prefaced it as this was difficult for me. And then, like, that was the headline. And then that eluded that there was going to be a story after that. And just as I was about to describe the story, this person literally let out a sound, like a field mouse or some sort of bird sound. But it was not a word. It was just a sound to break my focus or to break the focus and bring the focus back to themselves. Not that it was with them in the first place, but ultimately it derailed my share. And then they began to replace the space between us that I felt that was reserved for what I was about to say. They began to tell what was difficult for them currently. Well, that's an instance of stealing someone's fire. I would advise against that. And if someone does that, to call it out and put a pin in it. That is a huge red flag. And something that I feel is needing attention, even on a societal level. These little aspects or these events that happen between two people can pretty much always be expanded outwards and shown to be a larger, more complex pattern within society itself. Like, for instance, Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim religions, all from the Abrahamic side of things, you can see very clearly from Judaism to then what happened with Christ and the Romans, and then what happened with Islam and how that was all developed, that it's a triad of competition. One distinguishing itself from the other distinguishing itself from the other two distinguishing itself from the one, and on and on and on. It's a peculiar love triangle, and not the kind of love I'm interested in. But I'm just saying that they feed off of each other in a triad of discontent and comparativeness, egoic dynamics, saints, prophets, ways of doing things, rituals, on and on and on, forever distinguishing themselves from one another, although they all worship the same God, curiously enough. So there's something very peculiar going on there. And again, it's about, in some ways, fire theft. But it's kind of that's sort of a loose way of using the phrase fire theft compared to what I just spoke about. So be on the lookout for people who interrupt you and then insert themselves and ultimately steal your fire. If that happens, catch it, calmly say, I hear you. Can I finish what I was about to share? And we'll talk about your situation. It's going to be very awkward. It's not the only way to do it. You could let them finish and then revisit later and say, hey, I noticed this, that, and but it's touchy because it's deep. And king of the mountain, queen of the mountain, whatever you want to call it, certain aspects of shadow projection, they come from different layers of the psyche and trauma. And that's from a very deep level where some sort of primordial noise ushers out from the psyche in order to break focusing on someone else's pain because you feel threatened that you're not the center of attention anymore, and then immediately interjecting your own story, replacing a friend's story with now your story. This is childhood stuff, and deeply ingrained, and it probably has lots of lieutenants and colonels and captains and maritime sea vessels and platoons. It's probably connected to many other things, but just to keep an eye out. And tonight I want to end the share with a reveal, a sculpture reveal. And I want to dedicate this to the children of Gaza and the children of Lebanon and the children of Iran. I sculpt fantasy, fine art, and totemic objects as well. The link is down in the description to my website, and I'm also on Instagram, and the link's there as well. So tonight I'm going to be opening up a mold. It's called the Bone Toad, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a little toad with a bone balancing on its head, and then it has various motifs. I haven't seen this piece in probably maybe 5 years. I'm not even sure when I made it. It's behind me there. And so I'm going to switch over to another screen, a dual screen, and I'm going to turn on some lights. I'm going to open this mold up. I cast it day before yesterday. I think it was on Sunday. It's Tuesday morning at 2:30 a.m. And I'm going to open this up. I'm going to show it to you. And I'll be seeing it for the first time as well, at least in metal. This was done in one pour, so it's solid pewter. And here we go. So when I switch this screen, it's going to be dark. So bear with me, because if I turn the light on behind me, then my camera freaks out, and then I go Darth Vader mode, where things get shadowy and you can barely see me for some reason. I'm not really sure what's going on with my camera, but it's very persnickety. So I'm going to do this. And then you'll probably see this screen, this one, mine. It's going to go dark, or at least something's going to change. But ultimately, I'm still trying to figure all this out as far as how to compose things and the mic. I'm going to probably have to, I have cordless mics coming. They're going to be here tomorrow, actually. And so that's going to solve a lot of problems. And so I'm going to scooch over here. Still recording, 40 minutes in. I will hand it to Rode. They make a great long extendable boom that stays in place even though I'm extending out like 3 feet. To see what the camera does, it gets dark in this area right here. So I don't know what that's about, but here we go. This piece, I figure it probably weighs about 6 or 7 pounds. And yes, we're still good. I'm keeping an eye on the computer screen because it likes to pop off. The thing about opening these molds, I often break the plaster. I might crack a plaster mold once every 20 or 30 castings. It's quite rare, but what my point being here is that when you have wax or clay in the mold, the original sculpture, everything flexes quite easily. But when it's metal, nothing flexes. So often things are more difficult. So you see that? These divots here? Those are the negatives of the buttons that are on the silicone here. And those buttons, what I do later, not that I'm going to cast this piece again because it's most likely going to be one of one. But originally when I do this, when I make this, I always coat it with petroleum jelly so that this pops back inside the dry plaster easier. So even when I store the mold, I'm using the word hydrate loosely here. I hydrate the plaster with petroleum jelly, and then these pop back into the mold and a lot easier. And then I put it together, I put bungee cords around it, and then I put it back in storage. But ultimately, this entire mold process, it's pretty involved. It's all done by hand, and there's no pouring involved. The plaster shells are also done by hand. I'm really liking this lens. It's a Meke, M-E-K-E, 50 millimeter. I just like the look of it. It's very. They say the 50 millimeter is like the closest to actual human vision, and I see what they mean. Pun intended, I guess. Yeah, I like it a lot. So here it is. Let me put my glasses on so I can see it. I'll bring it up to the big camera too. But as far as I can tell, this turned out. Now remember, this is all one pour, and this is like, let's see. Well, let's call it 10 inches tall. Close enough. It's hard to see because the camera angle. You're mainly looking at my hands opening it up, but I don't want to move the camera and create a bunch of distraction. So there's, wow. It's always super magical to see a sculpture that I've made all one surface, all, in metal and such. Gosh, everything turned out really, really well. So this is the mold here, this guy. Very simple, two halves compared to other molds I've done. Yes, this is, there are things about this piece that I forget that I'm remembering now. Yeah. So I'm going to bring him up to the big camera. Curls going on tonight, folks. I was almost sort of feeling like I'm doing an Aikido move on this mic. So, and I got weirdness on here too. Great. All right. That's what happens when you're in the studio and you've got plaster on your hands. So here it is. Get the camera. Here we go. You can see the toad there. All the goodies down below, kind of worms and swamp objects and vines. But look at the detail. That's the bone, this thing right here. It's like a totemic, sort of a totemic headdress. And then I'll have a video of this piece when I do the finish work on it. Basically, I have, like, the bottom is a little bit of a convex because I poured it. Actually, it's not too bad. It shrank a little bit, but this won't be too bad to finish. So this one won't need a ton of work to refine. So I'll have it on the rotating dish pretty soon. Put that right in front of my face. See if I can fool the camera. I like it a lot. This the skinny part just, and still kept the. I might have, like, if, like, I'm evolving too, right? So if I had done this piece today, the only criticism I would have is I would have taken this off and maybe made this a little less bodacious and had the bone be more obvious versus it's kind of concealed by all these vines and I mean, it's there, you can see it. It's like you discover it. But yeah, that's just my thoughts about how I would improve it, but I'm not going to. It's just, I also love it for what it is too. So see a little pea pod down right here. Like a little vegetable pod. Got a little earthworm. Super pleased with this. This is what I like to see, because ultimately when I grab one of these molds, not only is it the time that I've spent with the original piece, and then I build the mold, and then the silicone has to set, and then I build the plaster, and then I demold the sculpture, clean the mold, put it all back together again. It sits in storage, and then I pull it out and I cast it. And then just in that, it takes less than 60 seconds to cast this piece. So within 5 minutes, there's a consummation of many, many hours of work just to get to this point. And when it turns out, I'm looking at it more, and it is what it was in metal. It's very complete. It's like the ending of a story in a way, and I feel proud of it. Like that whole process has come to a contentful ending. So I think what I want to say in ending tonight's share, an hour and 2 minutes in, I want to send my love out to all the unfinished childhoods that were interrupted by the dispassionate adults who unto themselves are broken children. And somehow hope that injustice, that they're not the only, that they themselves are just a mask, that there's something greater underneath right and wrong, injustice and justice, that this oscillating back and forth, this dualism, I want there to be more underneath that, or above it, or beside it. Let's call it beside it, because I don't really believe in up and down. I'm more of a horizontal, that things radiate left to right, versus heaven and hell. So I'm dedicating this piece to those childhoods that were interrupted, that 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 death doesn't prohibit you to continue playing, dreaming, being what you are curious about, that you dream of, that you're still you. Thank you for supporting this channel, and good night.